to, I need to wait. Welcome everyone to the Tuesday, February 11th, 2025 Tumwater City Council work session. And first we will start off with roll call. And I see, and I see that Council Member Von Holtz is in the gallery, but I'm assuming she'll be here. She is logged in. So with that, we will go ahead and start with our first agenda item, which is the Community Human Services program update. And our Finance Director, Troy Niemeyer, will be presenting. Thank you. Go ahead, Troy.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everybody. This is probably less of an update and more of a brief discussion and asking for a little bit of guidance. So for the Community Human Services Program, this is the $15,000 that I believe it's the Budget and Finance Committee makes the recommendation, and then Council makes these awards. And so we've been talking about this during kind of the off season based on our experience last year at the staff level. And we ended up, should have counted this better. Let me do this. Last year, we ended up with 9 applicants and 8 awards, which came out to, if you average everything, including the one that didn't get awarded, about $1,666 per applicant, or if we take out that one that didn't get awarded, it's an average of $1,875. And so to distribute that small amount of money amongst 8 or 9 or however many people apply or organizations apply, it is a pretty fair amount of work at the staff level, getting contracts in place, getting them signed and notarized, reviewing those, making the payments. And it's a little bit of a lift on the side of the nonprofit as well, where they, having for a pretty small amount of money, having to follow the city's procedures as far as the contract and getting reimbursed and all that kind of stuff. So our idea for you to consider was I think is, still not limit the applicant pool. As many people can apply as they want, but our idea was perhaps to limit the number of awards that are given out. If it was 3 awards, that's $5,000 a piece, or if it's 4, that's just under $4,000 a piece. It would reduce the amount of staff work, reduce the amount of and make the award more impactful to those who do receive it. This is to be clear, this is not us telling you what to do. This is totally your decision at the council and the Budget and Finance Committee level, but just something that we thought might make these awards more impactful moving forward. So we can talk and have discussions and whatever you want to do.
Start off with Councilmember Dolhoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Troy, for bringing this up. The one question I had is, I dig this concept in this conversation. What I'm wondering is, in this conversation, where is it also about addressing maybe the hurdles, the challenges of applying in the first place? Could those go together, of having a discussion about being more impactful, but what is happening with the application process itself so it's not as onerous with the nonprofits? Because I understand one applied, got awarded, but they said it wasn't worth it. So not even just with the dollar amount, but what does it look like to streamline the process of applying?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I don't know if I have an answer or if this is a Karen question. So I recall from the last round of funding, we did each applicant got on a Zoom meeting and made a presentation, which, to your point, is a bit of work in itself. Just they've already sent in the paperwork, and now they're having a meeting and spending their time to make their pitch. So that's, I think something we could take another look at. And I see Lisa has turned her camera on, so I will let her answer.
Yeah, thank you. I think absolutely we can always look at how we can make the application process better and easier. The situation that you referenced, Councilmember Dolhoff, was actually, I believe, an instance where the person turned down the award because of the contracting requirements associated with the service agreements that we put together that actually allows us to give the people some money. So it's the contracting process and some of our basic contracting requirements that are pretty typical when we're talking about dealing with consultants, but a little more difficult and somewhat cumbersome for nonprofits who may or may not have, for example, general commercial liability insurance or automobile liability insurance. So there's a couple of things at play here, I think. It's both the application process, but specifically the process that we ask them to go through to contract and then award the money that they actually are given.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. I would love for that to be looked at, right? For why are we requiring a certain level of liability insurance for a small nonprofit whose budget is under $500,000, right? So I would love that because that money can be used to leverage other state and federal funding, right? And move forward. So what would that look like for Tumwater to work about that and see what we could do? I love that idea.
All right, I'll go to Councilmember Jefferson.
Yes, Troy, I would like to know, so if it's 3 or 4 applicants, what does that number look like with the 15,000? I'd like to see 3, 4, and 5. And if we had 10 or 15 applicants, do they get a piece of the pie? What is the criteria for that?
Let me do some quick math for you. So for the first portion, if the easy one is if there were 3 awards, that would be $5,000 a piece because it's 15,000 in total. If we did 4 awards, that would be 3,750 per applicant. And as we keep doing more awards, that number just keeps coming down. And so
what's 5?
5.
I'm feeling a baseline between
Oh, that would
3
be
and 5.
3,000. That's an easy one too.
Okay. So yeah, I agree with narrowing it down to 5. That's a significant amount, and also streamlining that process. Maybe they can write an essay. Maybe they can submit some PowerPoint slides so it can be easier for us to weed through if that Zoom is just taking too much time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. I, for years, applied for this money as the director of the YWCA, and also came on to council and was part of when we raised it from $10,000 that we were all scrambling for to $1,500. So this money makes a difference, and especially to the smaller nonprofits, like Councilmember Dahlhoff said, that don't have huge budgets. And I'd like to suggest that we give it to 4. That's $3,750, and that is significant. And I think if we word it correctly in how we do it, people know that they are competing for 4 awards. And so that way you're not leaving out people. They know that's already down to 4. And some people will make decisions, as have been mentioned here, not to apply. And so I think that would be my suggestion of how to do it. I just want everybody to know how much difference what we think are small amounts of money make to smaller nonprofits. So 4 at 3,750 is my thought. And I'm thankful I don't have to go through the process to apply anymore.
Thank you for those comments. And yeah, and that's precisely why we wanted some direction from council on this. Is we'd like to, when we put the notice out that we're going to open up the application process, we would like to be able to let them know how many awards we plan to make, because that can make a difference.
Councilmember Swarthout?
Thank you, Mayor. I too, thank you, Councilmember Kathy. I too have been part of a group that has been able to benefit from, because we're just a pokey little group here in Tumwater, and so it's really, we would be glad to take any amount. And so I know serving on the budget committee was hard, because it's just like when you're doing CDBG or any of this, is that, or like when we do our LTAC and all of that, the ask is always bigger than what we have to hand out. And so, I mean, the last time we were trying to be fair and let everybody get a piece of it. And so, so I appreciate that part. The process is interesting. Poor Brittany. I mean, we drove her nuts, or she just having to stay on top, because it's like the whole thing about like the special insurance and all these things like that is just like, we don't do that. Our group isn't like that, because we're not like like a Homes First, or like the real, what I call the real nonprofits. So it was a lot for us to they keep coming back and forth, and then realize and then get it notarized. It's just different things. It's just kind of but we're grateful. So it's not, I realize you have to work within the process, and we need to make sure that we're doing it the right way. So I respect all of that, but if there was an easier way to do it, that would be great. And then yeah, as far as limiting it, I guess I just wish we had more dollars and shekels to be able to share with everyone. So, but it's like, we'd be grateful for any amount. But thank you, Troy. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I make one other comment? Just to remind everyone that we, the council, do not make this decision. This is made by the budget committee. So it is made by the mayor and the budget committee. And so I had to remind some people a year or so ago who were not happy that I wasn't the one who decided. I wanted to blame someone else, but just a reminder that that's how we do it. And don't know if we want to look at that also or whatever. I'm not suggesting we do. I'm just bringing it up. Thanks.
And I might just add that the budget committee is composed of 3 other council members. So. Councilmember Von Holtz.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry. I am having technical difficulties. That's why my camera is not on, because I won't turn on. And I look super cute today, but that's neither here nor there. I'm wondering what is our long-term vision for supporting these community organizations, and how will reducing how many we are able to fund affect that long-term vision? I'm just thinking of the risk to federal funding that it seems that every organization is looking at. And so every little bit will seem to help. I guess that's my only concern is, yeah, split 8 ways. It's not very, it doesn't seem like a lot to some, but it might mean even more with the climate that we're in right now.
That's certainly a good point. And yes, with the uncertainty around federal funds, that certainly can make this even more impactful. I guess I would turn that back. Your question about the long-term vision for the program, probably turn that back to the council. That's your lane to decide those kind of things, and then I just help.
Councilmember Doha.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, just to remind myself and us, council had requested to up to human services to $20,000. And I believe like in the process, I think one of the versions that Lisa had proposed was that that's a future discussion to raise it up to 20. And there was also a discussion for the senior protections, which is at 25,000 per biennium, to potentially add that under the human services and what that could look like. So I know in some of the versions of the budget, it was proposed. But also, we can propose an amendment. We can change that dollar amount, knowing that that would impact another line item in the budget. But that is the purview of this council. If we want to up it, we can, knowing that there's going to be an impact to something else in the budget. So we still have that option. We always have that option, right? To do an amendment, just knowing there's going to be an impact.
Yeah, I would be pulling up cobwebs if I tried to remember the specifics about the different versions of the budget line items. What I do know is, we did approve the additional money for, senior home repairs. That was, initially, we had done that under the auspices of the Community Human Services Program. But this budget, we approved that. And actually, I just reviewed and signed a contract, for that. It's a total of $50,000. So that's already under contract and on its way and made available through, Rebuild. Is it Rebuild Thurston County? Sorry, I get all my names not always correct either. So, so that one has already been, completed. I think the Community Human Services Program could change in its dollar amounts. You know, that would need to be a budget amendment, but it's also, you know, we would need to understand if that's the direction the council wants to go, because we typically open up this process relatively quickly, which is why we needed to bring it to you now. So, that would be something we would need some direction on as well. And I recognize that if we could wave a magic wand and do all of the great things for all of these nonprofits, we would do that, because they are more than worthy. They provide an invaluable service to the community. I'm not sure how we do that. I'm not sure how we get enough. How do we get to enough, right? What's enough? It's none of it is ever enough. I've worked with nonprofits as well and been on the asking side, and there's never enough to meet the need, because the need is so great. So, absolutely, we could look at a budget amendment to try and increase that. I'm just not sure how we fund, all of those needs.
Councilmember Kathy?
I was just going to say that it took us a while to get to 15,000. I remember the struggles there. Is there I mean, and I think our goals are still right on. What we're trying to help as much as we can within our budget, and what our city's goal and vision is for, you know, partnering in the community to, you know, to help people. When we do our budget, how much do we review and do at the end of the first year? Do we have conversations about any changes in the budget halfway? I mean, at the end of the first year?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead, Troy.
Yes. Towards the end of this first year of the biennium, is typically a time where we'll discuss kind of where we're at and how things are going. We're looking at all kinds of factors. You know, what does our revenue look like compared to what we thought it was going to look like? How are expenses shaping up compared to how we budgeted? And oftentimes at the end of the first year of the biennium, we will do, if not sooner, we will do a budget amendment in some form, because something has come up that we didn't plan for. And so that's likely to happen. It's a good time to do it. And it's just, we always keep on top of these things too, you know, good or bad. You know, it could be maybe the economy is not doing as well as we thought, and maybe we're just kind of holding things really tight, or we're even reducing. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but anyway, yes, there will be some conversations, both at the end of the first year of the biennium, and in addition to that, we are, as you probably know, starting to have meetings of the Budget and Finance Committee monthly, starting this year. Rather than just kind of on an as needed basis, we're going to do that monthly, and we'll be providing more financial reports throughout the year.
Is it possible to make some changes or add some additional money to this at that time? I mean, when we're looking at the budget again, or rather than trying to go back and change it now?
Yeah,
I really would like to see us keep working on getting this to, you know, 20,000, but I know what kind of work the budget committee is, so
Yeah,
Anyway,
I think
was my reason for asking about the biennium work.
Yeah, I think that would be a great time to look at that. And it's towards the end of this first year, that'll give us, we'll be almost halfway through the biennium. It's a great time to kind of reevaluate and we'll have a better sense of maybe our tax revenues are coming in higher than expected, and that would make your finance director really, really happy.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you'd make you dance. But
yes.
so I do agree and understand what Councilmember Dahlhoff is saying about, that we have the authority, or I get to ask for, what was it you said? You wanted to steal some more money, or how did you phrase that?
No, we want more tax money flowing into the city than we budgeted for.
I see. Okay. Well, anyway, that's my thought about the getting us up to 20,000 eventually.
I saw Councilmember Jefferson's hand up earlier. Did you still have another question or?
No, it was answered. It was just looking at when can we look at increasing it to 20,000, and that question was just answered. Thanks.
Okay, great. And I think Councilmember Von Holtz is trying to reconnect here. So is there any other questions?
Do we have a bit of consensus about this process here? I mean, we don't need to make a decision tonight. And we don't make decisions, but we were just kind of looking for some recommendations on how to move forward with this program, whether we, limit it to a certain number for this go around. See how maybe a suggestion would be to pick a maximum number of awards, whether it's 4 or 5 or 8, whatever that number you would like it to be, and then we could evaluate this next process. How does it go? We can talk with Karen about what we might be able to do from a contracting standpoint. So we could kind of report back in support of whatever we might think about doing at the midpoint of the biennium.
I threw 4 or 5 out there, but after Joan, she's heading towards 4, so I can agree with 4.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gabi?
Thank you, Mayor. So, if I listen to the comments correctly, whether we decrease the recipient to 4 or 5, I think it's a wash, but we have to keep in mind that the purpose of the award is a token from the city. It's not that you're going to get the most money from the city. So that ought to be where we keep our focus. So if you do it at if we stay at 15 without any impact to our current budget, that is 2,500. So 2,500 is enough if you have 5 or 6 recipients. So now bear in mind that those recipients, they are not solely dependent upon your 2,500. They are going to be asking other sources for money. So if they were able to, get money from 8 sources, that's $20,000. So we ought to keep in mind that this money is not solely dependent upon the city of Tumwater to give, to supplement a budget. It's just a token. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Councilmember Huerta?
Sorry. I wonder if how it's going to be, how it will come across. I understand what you're saying. I like even numbers. So if you've got 15,000, it should be, like 5. But if we're going to limit that, but I kind of agree with what Councilmember Agavi was saying, because some like when we there are groups in there that have other sources, you know, and in town and stuff, and then there's some that don't, and so that's, I guess it's just, you know, do we want to rethink about how we do the award process, you know, about, you know, whatever, like, I don't know how much of a deep dive we want to go into this, but, you know, like, as far as our strategic goals and things like that type of thing, as far as, you know, who represents what we really, you know, what we're really trying to achieve in our city, you know, is it, you know, like housing or whatever, you know, that type of thing. So anyway, I just, I'm wondering if we'll end up getting more people and then having to tell them we're only going to do 5. I just wonder how that'll work out with our nonprofits and what they'll think about that. So.
Well, I think the comment before was that we would announce at the very beginning how many awards we're giving, so that it's not a surprise when they're there that, you know, up to 5 awards, and you never know what people are asking for. I mean, it's always such an interesting interview process. So, Councilmember Dolhoff.
Joan was first. She had her hand up, then her hand went down, and then her hand went back up. And so now she's after me. So I will defer to Joan because she was first.
Or, well, if you're going to say something radical, I'll go after you. Oh. Okay.
I'm pacing myself today, so I'll wait. I won't do anything
Okay.
radical.
What I'm hearing is that we put out this that says the city of Tumwater is giving 4 awards, but that doesn't mean that 20 people can't apply. And so we have the subjective work of doing and selecting and doing some of that according to what are our goals, what does Tumwater you know, want to, you know, give to and push forward and help lift up. And so I don't think we can do all of this in a, you know, put it out in the announcement or something. It just puts a lot on us, on the budget committee and the council members. But I think it's good. From the other end of it, yeah, people are going to get left out, but we can look at something, because say the Family Support Center, who has lots of money, or ways, not lots, but, you know, ways to get other, you know, we see their budget, and someone who, you know, doesn't have as big a breach or as big a, you know, a budget or whatever, we may want to lift them up. And so we don't have to answer those questions per se. We just have to do what we think is right with this money in our community. At this point in time, we might give in a way that we wouldn't have 2 years ago, or, you know, 5 years to come. We all may be applying for it. I don't know, but anyway, that's my 5 cents worth. It was supposed to only be 2.
So I just also might add to that, since Lacey pulled out of the CDBG grant program, we get that every other year now, even though it's a little bit less, but that might also be an opportunity for some of these organizations that, you know, it's not like the long periods of time between grant funding that we've had in the past. So, you know, maybe the CDBG grant following year might be helpful too. So. Councilman Dolhoff.
Thank you, Mayor. So I understand the concept of like specifying the amount. Yes, I'm aligned with Peter of the need is there. It's a relationship building tool. So there's many aspects to this. So I would agree with a lower number if the process is improved to be more effective and efficient for staff and for the nonprofits. So when something comes back, if we could see something, how it helps staff and the nonprofits. I serve on a handful of nonprofit boards, and what I'm hearing from all of them is due to the federal changes, access has been denied, funds are not being repaid. So there is a greater need, no matter what their budget is, of lack of access for funds. So where does Tumwater fit in with this human services and the impact of Tumwater with these nonprofits? This is the perfect time, with all the uncertainty and the unknown, for Tumwater to take a look with Karen's lens, of course, to meet all applicable laws. But how do we streamline to serve to serve our community and also show that we're responsive and adapting to the change, this is the perfect time to do that, to help you and to help them. So I'm okay with the defined number if the process is refined to better serve all of us.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you. I think staff, you have enough information and to be able to kind of move that forward.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Great, okay. So we have another item on our agenda this evening, which is the code enforcement process briefing, and City Administrator Parks will be doing the presentation.
Yes, hopefully. Starting by unmuting. So this is just an update. It's intended to be just an initial information briefing on code enforcement processes very generally. In part, this is coming around because there are community concerns related to, especially a couple of our ongoing, more complicated code enforcement properties. So we wanted to start the conversation with the council about, what our current process is, just to clarify that, and to talk a little bit about what a more proactive process, at least at the end, towards the end of a code enforcement process, what would that look like? If we were to begin to more proactively pursue some of these more complicated and long-standing code violations, and get sort of an initial sense from the council where this type of activity related to property abatement, where it might end up in the list of council priorities. So there are likely going to be some additional folks helping me out with this conversation. We have several subject matter experts, obviously, Karen being one, Jay Mason being another in terms of code enforcement, and then Mike Matlock. So I've asked them to be ready to turn their camera on when they see me struggling to answer a particular specific question. But for now, that is the goal of tonight's process. So just generally, what we're talking about tonight is code enforcement. That's a specific activity that we do. Its primary purpose is to utilize the city's regulatory environment to promote and maintain both a safe and a desirable community. The current approach that we're using based on policy directives that were discussed and agreed upon back, I believe, in the 2015, 2017 timeline, was to approach code enforcement essentially on a complaint basis. So in other words, not necessarily to go out and proactively look for code violations on the ground, but to respond to complaints as they come in from neighbors or others. And so that's how our code enforcement process currently begins. The other component that was a major directive or an agreed upon approach was that we wanted to strive for voluntary and collaborative compliance. Many times people who are in violation of some city code have no idea that they're in violation. They have no idea that they're doing something that is disruptive or is regulated, even regulated. So we first always approach from the perspective of educating people, getting them assistance. Maybe it's a matter of referring them to resources that can help them with their code violation. But it's definitely from a voluntary and collaborative approach. And I will say, and this is where others on the call can correct me, but I believe probably 85 to 95% of our code violation processes end in that type of voluntary compliance. The vast majority of them. In terms of the code enforcement that we're talking about here, we enforce our codes in a couple of different ways. So for example, we issue permits. that's a proactive code enforcement activity essentially. So we're prospectively helping developers understand what our codes are and comply with those even before they start doing anything on the ground. The topic of tonight is specifically where somebody has already done something on the ground or some activity that is not consistent with some provision of the Tumwater Municipal Code. So that just is intended to kind of set the stage in the context of tonight's conversation. So generally speaking, the codes in particular that are utilized most frequently in our code enforcement process, we're primarily looking at Title 8, which is the Public Health and Safety Code, Title 15, Buildings and Construction, and then Title 16, which has all of our zoning requirements for developments and really how you use and manage and what the appearance of your property looks like. There are other codes that have some manner of could potentially be the subject of a code enforcement process. So for example, Title 12, streets, sidewalks, and public places, there might be something that we do with regard to street trees that's not necessarily covered by our tree ordinance, which gets applied most specifically up front during a permitting process, but there might be a street tree issue or some issue with sidewalks that needs to be enforced. Similarly, our public services title, that's where we talk about our water, sewer, and stormwater systems. We have a lot of obligations under our different permits for stormwater through Department of Ecology. So there are instances where we might have specific enforcement activities related to stormwater under Title 13. And then lastly, another code that reactively we might be enforcing would be Title 16, the Environment Code. Title 16 gets applied very thoroughly and very assertively during the permit process, but there may also be instances after the fact where we have to go out and do some code enforcement, whether somebody's doing something that's not allowed within a wellhead protection zone, for example, or somebody is doing something that's not allowed within a wetland area. So those are different types of codes that we generally are working to enforce here at the City of Tumwater.
So Lisa, I have a question for you. So that one with the environment, so for example, if we see houseless individuals camping there, are we gonna wait for us to get a complaint, or is the police on patrol checking that out? How does that work?
So I don't know that somebody camping in an environmentally sensitive area, so that's not allowed. But I don't know that it's necessarily a code that's enforced through this process, but rather through, regulating people's use of that property. So this is where Karen or Jay or somebody could hop in and help me out. But I don't necessarily think that that's a specific code that we would be talking about that goes through this process.
Okay, then I'm not tracking. So if I can get a little explanation on that.
Yeah.
So
So-
Councilmember Jefferson, I just usually that would fall under a property rights issue. Usually, so if a property owner would call us if they have an issue with someone camping on their property or trespassing on their property, and that's how we would try to address it. There have been a couple times that people have set up fairly large structures on city property, especially within wellhead areas or wetland areas. And when we're notified of that, we'll work with the city to try to come up with a plan to address it and have them move to a different location. But it's really, even that's a property owner kind of based, and this with the city being the property owner and us trying to work with water resources or facilities to identify other options.
Okay, so this is 100% complaint driven. Is that what I understand? So if there's no complaint for this, and then it's not going to be pursued. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that's correct. Primarily, we are complaint based. However, we have obligations, for example, for our stormwater permit. If we see a violation that is a violation of our stormwater permit, we are obligated as the holder of that permit to pursue that activity. So, as with everything associated with code enforcement, there are never black and white answers, that's for sure. So the majority of complaints and code enforcement processes are generated on a complaint basis, but not always.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So following on in terms of our current approach, this would be a process that would be our best case scenario. We would receive a complaint. Our code enforcement officers would, and any other subject matter expert that they would need based on the nature of the complaint to go with them. They'd go out to do a site visit. They would determine whether or not there was a violation. And then they would notify the property owner. First of all, you got to figure out who the property owner is. And then you would notify the property owner that there is a violation. And again, this is where we would, again, educate them about what the violation is, assist them with how they could address that violation, potentially refer them out to resources that could help them with that code violation correction process. And then ultimately, we end up with compliance at the end. So then, assuming we have a situation where we don't get that initial compliance. So if we get a complaint, we do our inspection, we provide a courtesy notice, the person is either unwilling or unable to move forward, we may start a more formal process of providing a notice of violation. Once that process starts, we have additional site visits to go back through and see whether or not they're complying with the notice. Let me back up, sorry. The notice of violation contains a very specific listing of what the code violations are and what the very specific correction action is that a person needs to take. Once we send that out, we give them a period of time. We go back in, do additional site visits and inspections. If they have complied, everything is great. We let them know and we thank them for their compliance. If they haven't complied, then we start down a process of assessing fines. And that is like a circular process. It may be 3 or 4 or 5 times or more where we're going back out and continuing to re-inspect. And that happens over a period of time. Councilmember Kathy, did you have a question?
Thank you. I do have a question. So some of the other code violations, we have quite a few things in there that, for example, parking your car on the grass. And we have washing your car in the driveway and having all that soapy water and so forth go down the drains. Where does all of that come in? Do neighbors call and say people are washing their car in their driveway? How many people know what some of these code violations are? And how do we let people know, for one thing? And the other thing is some of the code violations for cutting down trees. If a neighbor comes and, loves the tree that's in their neighbor's yard or something and says, why are you cutting down that tree? Or part of it seems to be on my property, or anything like that. By the time someone gets out there for any of these tree things, the trees in some cases have been cut down. Mm-hmm. And the answer to most of those by the homeowner or the person who owns that property says, well, I have permission from the city. I applied for whatever they want to call it. And that's kind of the end of that, unless the person who's upset about the loss of the tree or the trees pursues it. So I'm just thinking about some of these neighborhood violations. It's not some derelict house or a car that, I've called on some you know, some different things that have to do with cars left or junky things that people have called me about and want to know, and very responsive, the code violation appeal, very responsive. But these other things I'm talking about that are more daily living code violations that really upset some people, what do we do with those? Or do we do anything? Do we just say that's living in community?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of issues are wrapped into that, Councilmember Kathy. I think first and foremost, as I generally indicated early on, this is just one method, right? This is one method of compliance with the various codes that the city council has adopted for the city of Tumwater. This is just one piece of it. We do, we have a permitting process. So if that neighbor did get a permit to cut down his tree, then he or she has complied with the code that we have in place. And if the neighbor is upset by that and they call us and say, hey, my neighbor cut this tree down, and we can verify that the permit was issued, then there's not a code violation. It's not something that the neighbor likes, but it's not a code violation. Additionally, particularly around our stormwater regulations, we also have an obligation for education and outreach. And so we do a lot of work around trying to inform people about what the different codes and requirements are. And most people are super interested to hear about things like how to help protect water quality and things that they can do in their neighborhood to improve water quality. And it's more difficult. Other topics are more difficult to do outreach on because we have a lot of codes and a lot of regulations that have to be applied. So I don't know if that answered your question. I have a feeling it probably did not. But it's a continuum, right? We have a variety of different tools, including education and outreach, active permitting, and code enforcement. And there is a lot of overlap, and we do the best that we can in terms of responding to calls as they come in. As the calls come in, we have an opportunity to educate people about the codes. If we see trends, if we see a common or recurring thing happening, we certainly would then use that to trigger our more proactive outreach. Maybe it's to a neighborhood, maybe it's to a series of HOAs. Hey, did you know that when spring approaches, remember, you're not supposed to be washing your car and letting that water go down our stormwater system. So we do the best we can in each different circumstance. And this is just one piece in that process. So I think I can see Kelly, Councilmember Von Holtz's hand.
Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, I think that there are places around Tumwater that we know must be a code violation. Old cars up against the road, garbage, falling in roofs. I drive by a property almost every day. Today my sons were called by a property owner who was unaware of issues going on their property, went out in Tumwater, and there were garbage and campers that had just been illegally dumped on this property. And one of my sons was stuck by a hypodermic needle. So I understand that the process is long, but I worry about the public health impacts due to the, there's got to be notice given and all these additional site visits, and I just worry. And there are some places where it's just like, no, this has gone on far too long. What are we doing?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's in large part what the genesis of this and the impetus for this conversation is. Because there are those situations, and we do have a specific approach that was discussed at a policy level and agreed to. And because of a lot of those concerns that you just mentioned, Councilmember Von Holtz, as well as other very visible code violations that are not getting better, we need to have that, we need to revisit the conversation about what our approach is and what the implications of that are. So that's really why we're here tonight, is to describe this process generally, outline one alternative related specifically to code enforcement, and what we do with those, a process that we use for those worst offenders, and what the implications of those are. So, and I see also Councilmember Dahlhoff's hand.
Thanks, Lisa. With all of, Joan gave a couple examples, you gave a couple examples of potential code violations. Is there a hierarchy that our code enforcement and the police office uses, right? Because I'm just thinking Joan's example, your example, stormwater, I would choose stormwater over, right? But then if you look at it different, you're like, well, I don't want those contaminants going into our stormwater, right? But then I also think of noise pollution, light pollution. I think of my neighbor who prefers to do his yard work with a leaf blower on a weekend before 9 a.m. And our code says 9 a.m. But I'm not going to call that in. But is there a hierarchy that our police uses when calls are coming in? And does police or code enforcement reply to every response?
I see Jay turning his camera on, so I will defer to him. If you'd like to go ahead, Jay.
Thank you, Councilmember Dahl. Thank you for this opportunity. So yes, there is a hierarchy, but I also try to balance it out. So our police officers don't respond to code enforcement issues. So we have 2 dedicated code enforcement officers that are really half of their time each. So 1 FTE is dedicated to code enforcement issues. Now, if there's a criminal issue, you're talking about a noise violation, or some kind of a vandalism, or some kind of a big hazardous waste issue that's occurring now, our officers may respond to that. They will respond to the criminal side, but the rest are triage for code enforcement, and then the code enforcement officers will respond to them as they prioritize it. Obviously, they'll prioritize immediate issues right now, and then they'll also work with city side, some of the experts on the city side, to try to triage some of the other issues, because we're not experts in environment, in water resource issues or stormwater issues. And so we have to tap into the experts on that side of the house to help us navigate that. But we will respond to every code enforcement issue that comes in. And then I think what City Administrator Parks is going to get to is when we run out of voluntary compliance, some of the challenges we run into. And that's why we're coming to you to try to get some direction and potentially resource dedication.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Mason. That's great answer. Okay, so oh, Mike wants to add to it. Thanks, Mike. I can't see all of the hands, so you're gonna when you put a hand up, you come to the top of my little list. So go for it.
In addition to what Jay said, we don't operate completely on a complaint basis, like Lisa said. If we see a lot of trees coming down, we're going to deal with that right away. Because you're absolutely right, trees don't get put back up again. It is legal and under our code for homeowners to take down up to 6 trees in a 3-year period, and they need to get a tree exemption letter, not a permit, to do that, just so we can track that. People don't always know about that, so if someone takes down a tree, we'll typically go talk to them and say, we just need to get you a tree exemption letter so we can track it, and we just go on from there. If someone's putting fill in a wetland or illegal dumping in a critical area, that's something we would respond to without a complaint as well. So those kind of public safety issues are prioritized, and that's something we talked about people probably won't remember, I had to look at it myself again, but when we did this change to putting this over to police, doing some of the code enforcement, we did have a priority list, and public health and safety was the #1 priority.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that help. Okay, so again, this is a process, a more formalized process where somebody may have trouble with complying or they don't initially want to comply. At any point in time during this process, we may end up with compliance of some sort. Either, you know, they just get something, they get it cleaned up, they get it done, or they just change their mind and decide they want a voluntary correction agreement. And a voluntary correction agreement is basically a legal document between us and the person that's violating, that again outlines all the violations, identifies what they need to do to comply with the code, and in most cases sets a timeline for that. So this is again a process that is probably applied to more complex issues. And I don't know if I can give you a number of voluntary correction agreements that we have in place. But this is a tool that is a little bit more common than the next slide that I'm going to get to, which is, what do we do when we've got somebody that just is not able to or not willing to comply with our code? And at this point in time, it becomes what we call a property abatement process, or an involuntary compliance process. And it is largely driven by the court system. So these are just some very basic steps. Every single individual situation may have specific circumstances that are going to impact not only these the details within these specific steps, but the timelines, the costs, those types of things. So essentially, if we decide to go down the path of saying, okay, your property is in violation, you're refusing to do anything, and we've determined that we're going to proactively pursue abatement of this violation on your property, we have to start by going to court. In some cases, that court action may include not only establishing that we have a right to go on the property and figure out what the exact code violations are, but it is going to basically provide us with solid information in terms of, well, it gives us the authority to go on somebody's private property and begin a process to clean it up. We have to, once we are authorized by the court to get on the property and see what's there, we create an abatement plan. That abatement plan says, here's what it's going to take in order for us to clean up this property. Here's the timeline that we believe will be required. And we have to get some approval and authorization to move forward with that abatement plan. Then we have to actually do the work. And in most cases, that's going to be some sort of a public works contract, most likely, where you are dealing with not only doing the work to clean up whatever is happening, whatever the code violation is. There may be additional issues that you have to deal with in terms of disposal. If there's a hazardous material involved, special kinds of disposal, those types of things. And then ultimately, you would have to bring everything back to the court system and have a final judgment. And at that point in time, we could request and have applied a lien on the person's property. And then ultimately, the next step is to recover all of our costs associated with that particular process. So this is a costly process, and it takes a long period of time. So some of the considerations going into this, there are some legal principles related to how the law and how our court systems view a person's property and their property rights. So there is, we're always dealing with private property rights, people's ability to do what they believe they are allowed to do on their property. We basically are in a position of needing to prove to a court that they are in violation. We have to establish that precedent, that condition, and there's always due process rights. So anytime we say, we believe you're in violation, we have to go to court, we say they're in violation, they have an opportunity to respond, present their side of the argument. So there is a very strong consideration for private property rights and due process throughout this particular phase, every phase really of code enforcement, but this one in particular, which takes us down the legal avenue. Some of the other considerations are very specifically resource allocations. This is, there are outside costs associated with a property abatement process, and there is significant staff time involved. I'm going to, let's see, a lot of that staff time could be, it's going to be legal staff. It's going to be code enforcement staff. It's going to be potentially water resources staff, some of the subject matter experts who need to testify or provide documentation, engineering staff to manage the public works contracts, and put together the specifications for what the work actually needs to be so that we can issue a public works contract. So there is lots of considerations in terms of resources to devote to this. So one last thing, and then I would really like to get additional comments or thoughts about this. So here, this is an example of a current property that we have challenges with. And I asked Karen and Brandon and some others to walk through some steps that would be involved in this particular property abatement process, and to evaluate potential costs associated with that abatement process. So these numbers here are simply external costs. So these are not, and they're not all the external costs. Some of the more specific particular items that might be necessary based on the type of property this is and the violation. Maybe we need title reports. Maybe we need to hire experts. Maybe we need to hire somebody to provide service of notice to the property owner. There's other costs that are not associated with this. These are just sort of the big picture costs. So in terms of initiating court action in this case, we would be essentially going to the court and preparing initial information to present to the court, asking for permission to go onto the property, this person's private property, to do the inspection, make sure that we are providing all of the documentation and the analysis that would allow the judge to say, yes, you're allowed to do that. There would be legal fees particularly associated with that. I would imagine that the inspection work and the steps to get through that would likely be staff time. We would need to create the abatement plan, so that's going to take a lot of work, both at the staff level as well as working with contractors to prepare the cleanup plan, to prepare court materials, those types of things. In this case, there may be a need to, for example, to deal with civil issues that the current or be acknowledging of civil issues that the current property owner may have that we need to be aware of. And so there's this process of trying to create a plan of attack, essentially. How are we going to deal with this property? The next step would actually be, once we understand what the violations are, what the cleanup needs to be, we've presented a plan, we need to basically go in and have the court say and approve that particular cleanup plan. And it could include not just the abatement of the of the condition of the property, but if there are, for example, if there are tenants involved who reside on the property, and we are having issues with the property owner, there could be impacts to those tenants, and we have to be considerate of that, and we have to deal with that if that is a condition that exists on a particular piece of property. if we are required to relocate, for example, Councilmember Dahlhoff. Yes, ma'am.
Please continue your conversation and I will go after you're done.
Okay, this is my last slide. So if there are tenants involved on this property, whether they live in a building or they're staying on the property, if there is an established tenant right, there are other processes that have to be implemented in order to be able to relocate them, and relocation can be costly. This information in terms of what it costs to relocate somebody is based on our experience with some of our road projects that have required relocation. And then there's the actual abatement work. And in this case, we do not know what all is involved in this particular property because we've not been able to get on and do a thorough inspection. So there's no way for us to even estimate what the cost might be to do the actual abatement work. And then again, taking once all the work is done, taking all that information back to the court, getting a final court action and the property lien. And then there could also be costs associated with just trying to get the lien and or the money that we've been authorized by the court, just actually being able to get that cost recovery in effect. So, Councilmember Dahlhoff.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate this table, right? That numerical look. What I'm not seeing on the table is the costs for the surrounding neighbors, right? So if I'm thinking of the property you're thinking about, I know one of the neighbors has been unable to sell their house because when people are coming to look, there are fires right behind. If it's this particular area, there was a fire that impacted a house. So like when we talk about the costs, I understand that when it comes to the budget stuff, that's what we do. We budget for these elements. So I am in support of budgeting for these type of experiences because my baseline for this type of work is I'm not going to ask someone to do something I'm not willing to do myself. And I would not want to live like the neighbors have been around this area for years, right? With the break-ins, the stealings, the fires, the trash that's been coming in, the cars that have been set on fire. It is out of control. And for me, it's unacceptable. So I am in support of this discussion and identifying the cost and figure out how we move forward together, because it's not just the cost to the city or the property owner, it's the surrounding neighbors as well. There's a cost associated there. So thank you, Lisa. I
Absolutely.
appreciate this.
Yeah, yes, you're welcome. And absolutely, I agree 100%. And that's what makes it so challenging, right? Because in most of these cases, it's obvious. You drive by and you know there's a violation there. And yet there's a lot of work that we have to do to prove that and get the permission to do that. This is not an unwillingness on our part to do this work. The reality is, if we do this work, it is going to cost a lot of money. And it is going to take staff time, and that staff time is going to be affect other priorities and other work, right? So, and it's not going to be like if we go through an abatement process, Karen isn't going to be doing anything else for 12 months. That's not what it's like. It comes in bits and pieces, right? But there definitely will be impacts to our ability to get other work done, because this is a big time commitment in terms of what we need to do to move forward. And so hence the conversation. We definitely need to get more details. This is just sort of our initial blush, an initial shot in the dark. And with regard to budgeting, in the 23-24 biennial budget, there was a total of $25,000 a year budgeted for property abatement. So total of $50,000 for a biennium. That would get us not even through step 2 here, just in legal fees. We were able to get, I believe our total amount, initially, I tried to get up to $100,000 a year. In process of the different iterations of the budgets and to get us down to where we're not taking so much out of our our ending fund balance, I believe that is down to $50,000 a year. So we've got about twice as much as we had last year. It is something that we would need to go into very carefully and very thoughtfully, with the realization that not everything else, there will be other things that won't get done and we'll need to expend additional resources. And there is absolutely the opportunity potentially to have cost recovery. But it could be later in the process, and it could be a long time coming. So I am not sure who had their hand up first. So maybe whoever did could go between.
I believe it was
Councilmember
Councilmember Jefferson.
Okay, Councilmember Jefferson.
Yes. So I know that we contract out some of our engineer work from our public works committee meetings. So can we contract out some of this work, abatement work, to, lawyers to help us out?
That is essentially what you're seeing on this slide, Councilmember Jefferson. The dollar amounts that are in that center column, the right-hand side, it tries to indicate what those fees are. So there is rough estimate, $100,000 to $150,000 just in external legal fees for this particular proposition. If we were to, and again, that's just the legal fees for outside counsel to help with that. So yes, we would very much rely on external resources, and it still will take, it'll take staff time as well.
Okay, but not as much staff time. Right. Because it sounds like Karen would be bogged down with nothing but abatement work. So it's still going to take staff time, but not extensive staff time. Correct.
I would hesitate to say it would not be extensive. And I don't know if Karen is on and wants to turn her camera on and address that at all. Yes, we would have external resources, consultants helping us, but we would absolutely have to provide oversight, and it would likely be our staff that would be doing a lot of the inspections. In this particular example, there would be coordination with other agencies, because there are other county and state agencies that are experiencing violations on this particular property as well.
Right. Okay, so I agree with Councilmember Dahlhoff. It sounds like we need to do something. And we're going the right direction, but it just seems like everything just takes a lot of time in city government work.
Yes, ma'am, it does. So Councilmember Swarthout.
Oh, thank you, City Administrator. So I'm wondering too, having been on council when we've had two big issue properties, and one being Blast Street, and that how many, I guess, years it took to finally, because people don't understand that as a city government, we don't have the power to just take somebody's property and do something with it. And so I know it was really, really frustrating for the person that would come to our meetings on a regular basis, pushing us to do more and do it faster. And that was it was a huge issue. It was a big deal. And it took legal time to figure it out. And then the other property, we've had people, and I assume that's the one you're talking about, that we've had people, the neighbors from across the street, that have come in and just been so upset. And to me, that's like a criminal thing as well, on top of the fact that about the property. I think it was that one we finally got trailers cleared off of it, and then who knows what kind of toxic property that has become. And so are we talking about that? Are we talking about one particular thing, or just like globally projects that are coming up? Or is that the one is that what we're talking about, is trying to deal with this particular property issue, and you're asking us for funding, or just letting us know how much it's going to cost to really take care of that property?
I'm not talking only about one specific property. We probably have at least two specific properties that are very visible and need some work. And there are several others that are in the same condition.
Okay.
So there are the ones that are very visible and impactful to, particularly to the neighbors. But there are some that are also in this ongoing process. And I think Mike or Jay can maybe help me with some of the bigger, like how many, like the number. I don't want to get into the specific property details necessarily, but the specific number of properties we're talking about. I think there's between 5 and 6, 5 and 8, if I'm not mistaken. Jay, did you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good number to start with. I think that, I mean, and obviously scope and scale, right? Because there is a huge property in the city that has a massive amount of violations. And so I guess it just, it depends on how you want to talk about it, but there are probably 6 to 8 that we could look at addressing. And I think all of them probably fall within this scope and scale when you're talking about fiscal impact.
Yeah, we couldn't do all of the properties for anywhere close to this amount. And I don't know, Karen had her camera on. I think Karen can maybe address some of those situations that you maybe were referencing, Councilmember Swarthout, in terms of the past. Is that what you were going to speak to, Karen?
Oh, no, actually, well, I was gonna speak to the fact that it still involves quite a bit of staff resources, even if you do hire outside contractors. It's not something you can hand off completely. They do need oversight, and there's a lot of internal coordination that also goes on. So this would just be the external costs, not the staff and other resources that the city has. With respect to the other bigger abatements that the city's been involved in since I've been here, it is true, they have been slow. But we've tried to take advantage of situations where we could, where other relatives have gotten involved and helped us out, or whatever advantages have come up along the way, we've tried to act upon those and get some cooperation. And so honestly, since I've been at the city, we have not had to do a full-scale abatement through the court process. We've taken advantage of more cooperative efforts. We've still done some abatements that we did impose liens and have to collect on those, but it did not require us to get warrants of entry or warrants of abatement to go onto the property and do it against the property owner's will. So, that's a big difference from where we were. The two biggest ones that I'm familiar with, the actual just on the ground cleanup work, portion of the abatement, we're in the $100,000 range though. And I think we're probably looking at scale that's about double that, for at least for some of the properties we're dealing with at the moment.
Thank you, Karen. So, I can turn my screen off if you'd like me to stop sharing. I can leave this up if it'd be helpful, but again, we wanted to bring this to your attention because you have recognized that there is a significant frustration, which we share at the staff level, particularly around a couple of different properties that are historical and long-standing violations. Recognizing that that's the case and that there are significant impacts, not just to, neighbors, that's immediate. There are potential impacts to our quality of life and our environment, our water quality, fire safety, and our economy potentially. We've got one of the biggest, most visible one that is a detractor when you are driving through what remains of the main downtown business corridor of the city of Tumwater. It's a blight. and that can have negative economic impacts. And if it becomes a priority for the council, then the conversation really needs to be, and again, we're willing to do this, but the conversation needs to be that there's going to be a lot of money spent and a lot of time spent, and we're already strapped for both of those things. So it's a matter of rearranging priorities to a certain degree. I think, you know, the timing for this conversation is good. In terms of understanding and getting some perspective from you all about how you feel about this issue, where it presents itself as a priority. Part of our strategic planning process coming up here in later this spring, summer, and fall will include a conversation about priorities and where the council wants us to spend our time and energies. And this is going to be a big piece of it if the desire is to try and move forward proactively instead of waiting for those opportunistic times that Karen referenced. You know, we've had a couple of opportunities come and go just within the time that I've been here on this one example that I gave you. And we worked it and it didn't come to fruition. So yeah. That's kind of what we're looking for, is some feedback on from the council about where this sits in your list of priorities. Would you like me to stop sharing?
Yeah, I think you can stop sharing.
Okay.
So I don't think it's going to be a one and done conversation. So.
No.
This is not a one and done conversation.
Dave, can
So
you turn that down?
yeah. It's not a one and done. So it's one of the many things that we will be working on, bringing forward with strategic planning, and you know, where are we going? So Councilmember Kathy, did you have
I
something?
just wanted to make a comment about, I wanted to thank you for this and for this conversation, City Administrator. And it's for the first time, well, no, maybe the second time, that when you run for office, people tell you things or get upset or whatever. And this issue has been increasing. People saying, you know, what the H are you doing down there at the council, and why can't you take care of some of these things? And, you know, the city looks like whatever. And I just wanted to say that this is very informative for us and for you to listen to what all of the questions that we've asked. And thank you. It makes a difference, because then if somebody asks us something, we can refer back to this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So there'll be more of this topic to come in the future. This is, but at least start getting everyone thinking, and at least have the information, because it's never as easy. And when does it go from one type of process to the more extreme type of process? You know, what is that turning point? And I think we have a couple of properties that are to that point. So we need to figure
Thank you.
out.
Yes, thank you for your time and all of your thoughtful input. And yes, we will be coming back to you with this conversation in the future.
All right. If there's no additional questions on this particular topic, we're now to the Mayor City Administrator report and Administrator Parks.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two things. One, you all received an email today that included a draft of a news release. That news release has gone out. The second level 3 tree risk assessment final report has been provided to the city, and it's now uploaded. So please feel free to share that link and direct people to that, to our website. I believe there's been several social media posts as well. And we made a point of sending an email similarly to the email we sent to council members, to our board and commission members, just because there are many of them who have been involved in this process from the get-go. So just a heads up there for the public. And then I wanted to share with you, we have a we have a road project that's coming up, and it starts next week. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see where it's going to be. So are you looking at, do you see Kingswood Drive South?
Yep, we see.
Roundabout? Okay. So this is a project at the Tyee and Kingswood intersection. It's a T intersection now out there by Home Depot. This is a development project. So there's a developer who's creating impacts that needs to do this project. So it's not one of our own. We'll have inspectors out there to make sure they're doing the right thing, but it is a contracted project. It starts next week, February 18th. It is expected to last approximately 2 months. And so there will be some one-way alternating traffic control, some detours as needed. Some of the accesses to businesses may be partially restricted. There could be some congestion during school drop-off and let out. But we have our both our construction project management folks as well as our communications crew working on ensuring that we're providing good information to the public. And we just wanted to make sure that we were making you all aware of that same project. So Brandon was nice enough to provide me with this wonderful drawing. And you can see what it's going to look like eventually out there in the next few months at Kingswood and Tyee. So unless there are any questions. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, and I do not have any additional questions. I believe that a lot of council members have individual meetings scheduled, so we will be having conversations in the next week or so. So with that, if there is no other business, we will adjourn the meeting at 7:27. Thank you, everyone.